Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is Sunday, November the 18th, 2018. It is 4 p.m. New York time, 1 p.m. Los Angeles time, 9 p.m. London time, and I believe that makes it 12 noon in Sydney, Australia. Still learning to do that calculation, Cindy. I'm going to get it down pat pretty quick. And I just realized I have this recorded too on the Blue Jeans, so let me get that going.
Recording has started.
There we go. And this is a bit of an experiment we're doing here. We wanted to find out whether or not there might be interest in people having us in the Law of Attraction Change My Life group on the weekend to discuss a variety of topics. And one of the topics that had been proposed to me was the idea of Neville Goddard, because the Goddard episodes we've been doing, Cindy, have been received very, very well, which is a good thing. And so we figured, okay, well, one of the things that is tricky about Neville is that Neville is a little tricky. He's a little bit tough to get used to how to understand, what it is he's saying and what his intentions are, what his meanings are. You have to have kind of what we call the decoder ring. And I presume you brought your decoder ring, Cindy, because you always have it on anyway.
I did.
Yeah.
I think I'm ready. Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Well, it's kind of like when you first start learning about conscious creation, there'll be a lot of new language. Mm-hmm. I mean, just like anything else that you're learning about, you start learning words that you hadn't heard before, or words or phrases that are used in a way that you hadn't heard them used before. And Neville is not unlike that.
Right, exactly.
Neville uses a lot of things that are like, wait, what is he saying there? But after you start understanding it, it starts making a lot more sense. And so I thought it would be fun to talk about Neville. And I've gotten, and you've gotten, messages, emails from people that are saying, tweets we've gotten, enjoying your discussions about Neville. And so we thought, well, maybe some people would like to join in the discussion and ask some questions or give us some input on their own thoughts.
Absolutely.
About Neville.
And of course, we started. We've done how many books? We've done 3 of the smaller books now. We just took on one of his magnum opuses this past Tuesday or this past Wednesday, I guess it was. Yeah, and so I think we've kind of decided. Okay, we're engaging in full Neville mode here on LOA today.
I say it's a Neville immersion course.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Just immersing ourselves in it, and I have to say, I mean, there are a couple of things that come to mind for me when I think about Neville always. Of course, the first one is the idea of assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Because so many times, I think, in other law of attraction methods, teachings, there's the method starts much sooner than that in the process. In other words, people start imagining or visualizing or writing about how the thing is going to come to pass, and Neville just jumps right to the end.
Right.
He says, don't worry about any of that. Let's just, so I kind of, and because Neville does this thing where he talks about, he uses the phrase, the pruning shears of revision.
Yes.
Talks about changing, going back and changing the past. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Neville is a time traveler because he's got us jumping all the way to the future where it happens. He's got us going back in time to recreate something. And I'm a big time travel buff. I love movies and books about time travel. So it's perfect. It's just perfect.
It's kind of funny because when Neville was doing his writing and his speaking, he was doing so in a time where the teachings of Albert Einstein and the newly evolving quantum physicists movement was just kind of underway. But Einstein had published his famous treatises just 20 years before, and I mean, it barely had even started to penetrate the human consciousness at that point. And it makes me wonder, because he never actually uses any of Einstein's terminologies, but a lot of the things he talks about, I mean, you're calling it time travel, and that's an accurate way of describing it, but it's also timelessness, the understanding that there really is no time, or that time is an illusion, perhaps is the better way to say it, right?
Time is not linear, right?
Time is not linear, yeah.
Well, you know what else about that, though, is like you just said, Einstein had come out with some of his theories, published his things like 20 years prior to like Neville teaching some of this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, good news travels really fast these days.
Yes, right.
Right? I mean, we go online and we look on the internet and we're watching on Twitter, the Twitter feed or wherever or reading news or whatever, and there's headlines everywhere, there's new discoveries everywhere, they're just streaming at us as fast as they can, and yet 20 years before or 20 years after Einstein's theories, I don't know how much time it took for like the average person to know about these things.
Mm-hmm.
Were they only published in scientific journals where, unless you were in the scientific community, you wouldn't really know about it? It's not like Neville was on Google. So
yeah, right.
It makes me wonder, right? It's like, I don't know if he would have known. But I read something really interesting. It was actually a transcript of, I think, a lecture that Neville gave. And he told this story about a woman, when he was, I think he said 7 years old, a woman telling him, I've had a vision of you and I don't know what you're going to do in your life. But I do know that it's going to touch and, benefit. I don't know if she said hundreds or thousands or millions, but many, many people. And she said 100 years after you're gone. She said something like, there will be a revival of the things that you teach in your life and it will like start all over again. And I thought, oh wow, because that's kind of amazing. I think he was saying that in the 50s or 60s about his own life.
Absolutely.
So we're sort of seeing that, like, right? There's kind of a interest in Neville right now. So.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and plus, the reason I mentioned Einstein and the relativity theories and so forth is I'm just impressed because if he didn't know about Einstein's writing, if he wasn't aware of the revolution in physics that was going on at that time, then he was getting it in his own way, through his own methods, probably just through his own intuitions. And that makes it even more interesting and more impressive that he was able to reach these conclusions without having access to the scientific thinking. That's really pretty good.
Right, and some of the things that we have read that he said, like he said, look, this is just my experience, but my experience has been so powerful that I can't deny it. And so this might sound super mystical. I mean, he actually referred to himself in later years as a mystic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He didn't call himself a minister or a preacher or a teacher. I think it was mostly, he always would say, mystics understand this.
Right.
They would go on to describe. So it's kind of interesting that, I think a lot of it is just with him. He experienced something so real, you couldn't talk him out of it. He knew it was happening. He knew what methods worked. And like when he talked about, not that meditation is a new thing. I mean, there have been experts in meditation for thousands and thousands of years, right? But his own experience with whatever you want to call it, he would call it, now I can't think of the word that he used, but when he talks about like laying down and immobilizing your body and, relaxing, and it's like, okay, it sounds like you're meditating.
That's right.
It was all his own experience, and I think sometimes he was actually trying to find words to describe it. Because his language is so different.
Absolutely. Yeah, very true. And
I'm curious to know what questions people have. Do we have anybody asking any questions yet?
We have people who are tuning in. People are saying hello, waving hello, and so forth. No questions have appeared yet in the chat. But, this is primarily an opportunity for people who are listening in on the live streaming on Facebook to, if you have any questions that you ever wondered about Neville. And I'm sure there are plenty of them. I've had plenty of them myself, and I've raised them with you during our many podcasts. But any questions or any thoughts that you want to share with us? This is basically a special session on the Facebook Law of Attraction Changed My Life group, just to do interaction with people on that group. So, guys, I can see you're listening in. I mean, I can see the evidence of it here, number of eyes listening, and so forth. Kick in. Tell us what you have in mind. Tell us what you're thinking about. And meanwhile, we'll just kind of share some of our own thoughts about Neville. I know that for myself, the biggest thing for me about Neville is that I have transitioned from a place where I was to a place where I am now. Where I was before was, oh God, he's the guy who puts out all the stuff with the scriptures. I can't bear to read any of it. To now, it's like, well, okay, I've gotten past a lot of that stuff because there's some pretty good meat in there. And This is where that Neville Decoder ring comes in handy. But when you start really reading it the way you and I have been doing it in the podcast, where we just basically mincemeat it, we take one sentence at a time and we ask ourselves, what exactly is he saying there? And do some word substitutions based on what he's inferring and so forth, and draw from, look at the sources that he's taking his quotes from and ask ourselves, how does that integrate? All of a sudden we start getting new meanings that, the basic wording that we are used to seeing from, say, a religious perspective, it takes on an entirely different meaning. It's an entirely different feel.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? I think that might be the what you just said is sort of a key to really getting as much as you can out of it, is that sometimes we read something too fast. We don't take the time to really dissect it and make sure that we understand one sentence or one paragraph before we move on. And so we may read a chapter and think, I don't understand this. And I probably did that with more than one book.
Sure.
In the past. But when you were saying you've had questions about Neville and you've asked them to me, well, but in those same discussions, I've had a lot of,
yeah, right.
moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. And it's because we've taken the time to really dissect it and mincemeat, as you said, really, really look at it and put it under the microscope and say, what does this mean and how does it apply? How does it apply, to my life? I love the idea of his pruning shears of revision. I was looking in this book that we both have. It's a compendium, a treasury of Neville writings. And there's a chapter in there, Turn the Wheel Backwards. And I thought, once again, going into the past. And I wanted to tell a little story about how I've used that method.
Sure.
In the past year, that was really amazing to me, but I stuck with it. That's the thing. All of these methods, I recognize that there's one thing that they require to be effective. And there's another part to it. 1 and 2. The first thing, they require focus, intense focus to be effective. But the other part is that if you stay with it and just don't give up, you are training your mind to have intense focus. So you're like taking back the control of your own mind and having the ability to have that focus. So in other words, I often liken it to meditation. When we're meditating, I've had people say, I can't meditate. I shut my eyes, I start to relax, I try to focus on my breath, and then I'm thinking about my to-do list. And I have to bring my mind back. And then it happens again, and I have to keep bringing my mind back. And I'm like, yes, you're doing it. That's meditation. Keep bringing it back. That's how Neville's methods are with me. So I had a conversation that did not go well with someone. Someone I really care about. And it just, they said something that I certainly didn't want to hear. I probably said things they didn't want to hear. It just wasn't a very great conversation. And afterwards, it was interesting because I can see myself at some point in my life being really hurt, being really upset, just not being able to stop thinking about this, running this conversation over and over in my head. But I didn't do that. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use this Neville method. I'm going to turn the wheel backwards. I'm going to imagine that conversation the way I wish it would have played out. And not just the way someone would have spoken to me, but also the way I would have replied. Like, what if this conversation was the sweetest, most wonderful conversation I've ever had? What would it sound like? And I sort of rewrote the script, right? And I played it in my mind that way. And every time I was tempted to remember the conversation and to feel, poor me again. That wasn't fun. I didn't like that. Every time I would say, no. This is how I remember it. And I would run it through in my head 2, 3, 4 times. It's just a short conversation, but I would remember it as if it was, let's rewrite this script to, like, anybody listening would say, warm and fuzzy that little conversation was. And that's what I did. And 2 things happened. One, the charge of the original conversation was just gone. I didn't have a charge on it anymore.
Which is huge.
Remember it.
Yeah.
Right, it's just gone. There was no trigger anymore. And then about 3 days later, I was speaking to this person and I sort of in a joking way brought up the conversation, like, just in passing made mention of something that was said, and we both started laughing. It was just fun.
That's great.
And I think, I'm sure that years ago in my past, I've had situations where I would just replay a conversation, a conversation that didn't feel good, an uncomfortable conversation, over and over in my head.
Right.
And analyze it to death and try to figure out how wronged I was, right? It's like, and I just didn't do it. And I'm not saying that, I will remember this every time. I hope I do, because it was very powerful and very effective. So I'm throwing it out there because it's one technique. I actually have given this homework to a couple clients in the past month or so. A client that came to me with a problem, and in the telling of it said, well, I had this conversation and I was really hurt by what this person said. Said, okay, we're going to do some homework, and this is what I want you to do. So this is the other part to that. If you want to use this technique, and this is what I told her. I said, if I decide today that I'm going to have a piece of cheesecake, because I love cheesecake.
Yum.
I'm going to go get it, and I'm going to dig into it. And why am I doing it? Because it tastes really good, because I'm going to enjoy the daylights out of this. When? Now. I'm eating it now. I'm enjoying it now. Now, am I doing it so that a month down the road I can look back and remember? Well, I will be able to do that. But none of my goal is for later. It's not to manifest anything later. My goal is to work the process and to enjoy it now. My goal is to eat this cheesecake and enjoy it right now. I want to taste it. I want to savor it. I'm not going to wolf it down. I'm going to just really enjoy it, right? That's the goal.
Right.
So that's the goal with using this process. I'm going to rewrite this conversation. I'm going to remember it the way I wish it would have happened. And I'm going to enjoy feeling what it would feel like if it would have gone that way. I'm going to enjoy the warm, fuzzy feeling of a happy, sweet conversation. For now. That's the process is the goal, right? It's really important to remember that, because if we're only working a process so that we can manifest something in the future, we're already attached to an outcome.
That's true.
We're already creating resistance.
That's true. That's a good point too. It's one that actually gets overlooked over and over and again in every single Law of Attraction group on Facebook that I've seen. Because inevitably it's a series of requests for help. This is this and this is going on. How do I manifest X? Right?
And then people will say, but I did that and I did it and I did it and I tried and it's still not happening.
Right.
And it's because we get so attached to an outcome.
Yep.
And remember that when we think of resistance, we often think of it as no, right? Are you resisting something? No. I want it to come to me. I'm not resisting. But there are two types of resistance. Aversion, that's the no, I don't want that. And attachment, that's the yes, this has got to happen. Please let this happen. It needs to happen now. Both of those things are resistance, and they're both going to block you from manifesting it. So it's living in the present moment, enjoying it right now.
It's a very good point, because when we're in the present moment where we're enjoying it right now, we can't simultaneously at that same moment in time be worrying about, well, geez, I hope this thing's going to come up in the future because I really want this to show up. And I know I'm in a point of lack because I'm saying that, but I really want it to show up.
That's right. That's right.
You can only focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah. You can't enjoy it as if it has already happened and be worrying about whether it's going to happen at the same time. Those two things are not congruent. So,
that's true.
So that's something that I learned from Neville that I've used for a long time, and I've been using it more and more lately because we've been in our Neville immersion course, and I'm just watching it unfold in such an amazing way. It's I really want to hear feedback, from people that have tried it.
Well, we got a lot of people listening, a lot of people paying close attention to what we're saying. Nobody's volunteering any questions yet. But let me share something with you that I saw earlier. It wasn't actually in this group. It was on another group in Facebook. It was actually an Abraham group. And in this group, this person had come on, this guy had come on, and he'd posted this post that was basically dissing the whole law of attraction thing. And the basis for his dissing was that, in his view, I'm going to try to remember all the things that he said. There were like three things that he pointed to. One, he says, everything that everybody posts about it is about feeling good. So there's no attention to any of the dark side. And yet spirituality has to be about the dark side, he says. That you can't really have a true spiritual conversation without it. Second, he says, because about 80 to 90% of the people he sees posting about it are female, then there's this feminine aspect to it. He wasn't really clear what that was exactly, but that was the second thing he objected to. And let's see, the third thing, I know there's a third one too. I can't remember what the third one was, but the first two were the main ones. And he was basically saying, this is just sort of a Western thing. Oh, I know what the third one was. The third one was everybody's trying to manifest money. That's what it was. And he was really objecting to that. He thought that was just really absolutely crazy. And so I thought I'd bring that up in this context because Neville doesn't really talk about trying to manifest particular things very much. He does tell stories where that's involved, but it's not like the major thrust of his thing. His major thrust is more along the lines of, here is how to live the kind of life you want to live. Here's how to connect spiritually to what you want to connect to. And I don't say that's necessarily the same thing as what this other guy posting was saying, just the similarity caught my attention.
Yeah, so interesting that, first of all, to those 3 points, the dark side. Jung said that unless you make the unconscious conscious, that it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Mm-hmm. So, I know there are lots of different viewpoints out there within the law of attraction circle communities. I'm one of those that does a lot of shadow work with clients. I'm okay with the dark side. I know it's there. I think we have to recognize it. So, it's not all love and light with me. That is for sure. And, I think it's because we all have those emotions that we want to call dark. We all have parts of ourselves that we feel shame about. And if we don't bring those things out into the light, then they will affect everything that we're trying to create. So it's the same thing with, you've heard me for a year talk about this all the time. It's like people that don't want to ever mention, they think that they judge themselves as wrong if they feel angry about something. I'm like, no, it's a human emotion. We're okay. We're okay to have the whole spectrum and to use them all as information. They're always giving us information. The second thing, we just send them to Neville on this sounds like feminine energy because, there's a somewhat subversive, aspect to law of attraction as well as to magic and other powers that are often looked to and adopted by societies that have been oppressed. And so we can see that witches always rise up when there's a great deal of oppression on the feminine, right? We can just look at Neville and say, Neville says the subconscious is the feminine aspect of your consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's the womb of creation, and that within your subconscious, everything is being created. So I don't know what to say if someone objects to the feminine. They need to work that out first.
Yeah, right.
And then,
that was my thought. Like, you got a little issue there. If you think feminine's a bad thing, like, okay, well, have fun with that.
And then there's the idea of money. Now, this is really interesting because, yes, you're right. If you look through Neville's teachings, you're not going to hear too much about manifesting money.
Right.
And I think this is why. You said that your person there had said that this is all so Western and that everyone in the Western world is just always trying to attract money, well, that's because for us, money's the how. Right? Everything in our society is somehow connected to money. Even when, we think about healthcare, right? It's like if the thing I want to attract is better health, oftentimes people think, well, if I had more money, I could see a different doctor or get another kind of treatment or treat myself better, eat better food, take better care of myself. And so they connect it to money. We connect a lot of things to money And money is just the how. So that's always there's this famous question that a lot of life coaches like, if you won the Powerball, like,
yeah, right.
In other words, if you didn't have to work again, what would be the thing you'd want to do? Mm-hmm. And we're always just trying to get to that end thing and to dig down and figure out what's really under that.
Right.
And people that say, I want to make $1 million. Okay, that's cool. I don't have any problem with you making $1 million. Why? What would you do with it if you had it?
Yep.
And sometimes people can't answer that question, but if we think about it, there's an answer there. There's something that we want, and it's not really the money. It's what we think the money is going to bring us. And it might be freedom, might be security, it might be actual things. We want a bigger home, or we want to travel, or whatever. We're all connecting it back to, if I only had a little more money. Well, Neville's going to tell you, let's not talk about the money. Let's imagine yourself in Barbados, right? Neville was not trying to attract enough money where he could buy a ticket to Barbados.
That's true.
And yet he says in the story, I had no money. I had nothing. I had no money. I had no work. I had no connections. I didn't have a way to do this. And yet he was not trying to manifest a good job so he could make enough money to buy the ticket. He just started imagining himself in Barbados. So he was assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And what happened? He gets a letter in the mail way back in the 30s or 40s, whenever it was, from his brother with a ticket. We'd like you to come to Barbados. Here's your ticket. So I think the money thing, I think he's right, whoever this was. You're absolutely right. People are always wanting to manifest money. I've done plenty of money manifesting, right? Because I wanted a certain thing. And it was like, okay, this is where I need to go. More and more, I'm just jumping to the end with Neville. I'm just time traveling right out to wherever that thing is, not worrying about it too much.
The only thing I might disagree with him where the money is concerned is I don't think it's limited to the West, because as far as I can tell, every culture around the world is money driven. So it's pretty much universal.
Yeah, we're a global economy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
We are getting we aren't getting questions, but we're getting a lot of good comments. Our friend Jeffrey is back. Jeffrey, of course, was posting like crazy in our last one. So Jeffrey says a few things. He says, first of all, there really is no dark side. Even in the contrast, there is learning and growth and potential. And he says, in regard to shadow work, mirror work, root work can all be considered dark work. Even witches and wizards, creators and practitioners were considered dark.
Yes. It's all a spectrum. It's just polarity.
Yes. Absolutely it is.
Everything contains its opposite.
More comments from him. It's everywhere in the world. It is like this. Money is very important. The lack of money is a mindset that's rampant in the world. So a lot of us are working on give back to let others enjoy freedom. Those are like 4 posts that I just read in a row from him.
Thank you.
So, yes.
For those comments.
And Bridget didn't have a question. She just said that we're on point. So I guess we're touching the right stuff here.
Yes, very good.
Which is good. The others are just all hellos. Hi and hello to Nasha and Christy and Hannah and I think I missed somebody. But this is an opportunity, by the way, to share not only thoughts you have, but if you have any questions for us. Cindy is my Neville Goddard expert. That's why I brought her on for this special event here on Sunday. So feel free. If you've had any questions about Neville or just any questions in general about the law of attraction, she's also a professional life coach. This is a good opportunity to ask. And Nasha has a quote, "Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Very true.
Agreed.
And the number of listeners is increasing. It's just nobody's got questions. I guess they all feel either very, very confident or they're just waiting to see what more we can tell them about Neville. I'm not sure which it is. It's one or the other.
One or the other. Well, so I've used the Neville process to go back in time and revise a conversation.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that actually, because when you talked about that, then you had like 4 or 5 other points, and I didn't want to interrupt you because you were on a roll, but. That's something that I have actually been kind of, running into quite a bit, which is I recognize the importance of doing the revisioning, and that's always been a little bit of a challenge for me. I'm getting better at it because I just try to think of it in terms of just imagining, and I'll play the imagining out. But the thing that I find is I play it out fairly quickly, and then all of a sudden, I'm back to my old thought patterns again. And if you understand what I mean, it becomes, it's almost like I'm trying to go in every single time that I have a thought pattern and replace it with a new one. It's like the meditation, only I'm doing it in real time during the live world where I'm actually doing stuff. And it gets frustrating because it's like I'm running out of material here. I don't know what else to put into my little fantasies I'm creating.
Well, I don't think you need to. And actually, I think there's a lot of value in keeping those little vignettes short. You know, like the conversation that I was speaking of was it was a fairly long conversation, but there was one part of it that was the part that kept coming back up into my mind because it was the part that sort of was the most charged for me probably. And so one of the things that I did was when we are in a conversation that's uncomfortable or, you know, difficult conversation that has a charge for us, we can fix some of that with empathy. And that is us having empathy for the other person and recognizing that they're feeling charged too. There's something within them that's going on that's causing them to be defensive as well. And then recognizing or imagining that they're having empathy for us, that they're recognizing, okay, you're not feeling really great about this conversation and we need to change that. We can actually do that in real time, in real conversations.
Yeah.
And it works great. When we don't, when we have a situation we want to revise, it's important to remember that. But the other thing is not to try to make those things too long, too heavy, too winding, right? We're not writing like a screenplay for a 2-hour movie. We're just writing a skit that's like 3 sentences long. That way we can revisit it over and over. And we can tap into the feeling of what it felt like hearing that particular thing and saying a particular thing that felt better to say and felt better to hear. And we don't need to make it any longer. We can just go back to it. And remember, keeping in mind that we're doing this for the benefit that we get in the moment of enjoying that conversation.
Right.
Like the cheesecake. It's not, you know, and the thing is we are going to see results in the future from this process. But when we make it about the results, that's when we start creating attachment. So it's always better to enjoy it for now and really feel it.
We finally have our first actual direct question, and I think it ties directly with what we're talking about here. Now Bridget was overhearing us talking about how Neville really doesn't talk much about money specifically. For instance, you pointed out the story about the steamship ticket. Now her question is, you said you have manifested money a lot of the time. I don't remember quite saying that, but can you throw more light on this? I'm trying to manifest an amount right now.
Well, and that's the light that I want to shine on it, is that there's nothing wrong with deciding you want to manifest money. Like I do it all the time. But there's usually a reason for it that's specific. And that's why I said when someone says to me, well, I want to make $1 million this year. Okay, great. Let's do it. First, let's talk about why and what you're going to do with it. What will having that give you? You know, whether it's $100 or $1 million, it doesn't matter. There's probably a specific reason why you want it. And it may be an actual physical reason, like need to pay a bill, want to go on a trip, whatever, like you want to spend it on a specific thing. And then oftentimes people want to invest money because they think they will feel more secure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And sometimes, yes, but it doesn't always work out that way. Believe me. I've known people that had more money than they could probably spend in this lifetime and were no more secure. They still had, you know, money things going on. So really, when we want to manifest money, get really on why. And if you can, just jump to the end and start doing the work around that thing that you want, because things can come our way, opportunities, people, things, through other venues than just us buying them. Not that there's anything wrong with buying them. That's okay too.
Buying them is good.
We can buy things, but we can also receive gifts, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, Nasha jumped onto the same topic. She says, yes, I would like to know about money manifestation. And one more thing, I have manifested a lot of things without money, but the things I want the most, for some odd reason, it doesn't manifest.
When someone tells me that the things they want the most are the things that they're having trouble manifesting, I think we can get a little complex there, but I usually say this, and this goes back to that dark side we were talking about.
Right.
So whatever you are creating, whatever you are manifesting, which it might be the lack of that thing you think is the most important thing ever, there's part of you that's really digging that. There's part of you that's really happy to stay right where you are and to not manifest that thing. And oftentimes it's because we have a counter intention or there's some kind of payoff. I heard a story once, and this is very extreme, but it was a story about a woman that was in a wheelchair. And because she was in the wheelchair, there were a lot of things that got done for her, right? She couldn't do certain jobs and people took care of her. And there came a time where there actually was a cure for whatever was keeping her in the wheelchair, and she really didn't want it.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Well, it's like, because if I get this thing that I think I really want, I'm going to lose whatever I have now. And the thing that you has now probably has some good parts to it. We're always worried about, we often don't manifest because we're worried about losing something. And whatever it is, we think about what we call our comfort zone. And it's usually anything but comfortable. It's just familiar.
Yes. Boy, is that the truth. The comfort zone is anything but comfortable. In fact, it's about as uncomfortable as you can be.
It's why people stay in jobs that they hate. It's why people stay in relationships that aren't really working.
Oh, God, yes.
Because they're familiar with it. And remember, the part of our brain that calls a lot of the shots, I always refer to it, some people call it the reptile brain. I like to call it the squirrel brain. Because it is actually like the size of a walnut, I think. It's not much bigger than an actual squirrel brain, right? And squirrels, all they really care about is keeping themselves safe from the dog that's chasing them, finding a nut to eat, and making some baby squirrels. That's it. They don't think about anything else. Those are the goals in their life, and they don't want change. They don't want anything to keep them unsafe or put them in danger. And our brains are a lot like that. Like, we may be in a terrible job, but we know we survived it yesterday. Mm-hmm. So when we start thinking about branching out and doing something different, part of us says, oh, you're okay where you are. Let's just stay. That actually is the underlying reason why we don't sometimes manifest something that we really think that we want. Every big shift comes after a big letting go. So it's being willing to let go of whatever it is we have now.
Bridget said thank you, and Nasha has a follow-up question. She says, how often should we visualize?
Well, I visualize every day. And I meditate, and I often tap into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. I don't often use the word visualize, even though I guess that's what I'm doing, but I like to bring, that always says to me like sight, like I'm trying to create a picture, which is fine. But I like to bring all the senses into my work. And so smelling, tasting, feeling, touching, hearing, I like to bring it all in. But as far as how often, at least when you're falling asleep at night. That's, according to Neville, since we're talking about Neville, and he's my favorite, that is his number one time. Mm-hmm. It's not the only time, but he says this is really important. We've covered some of his thoughts on that in the books that he's written about sleep.
But he's done entire chapters on it.
Yeah, sleep is the door to the unconscious.
Yeah.
Or the subconscious. And he is telling us that our subconscious is what's doing the actual making. And so we want to be sure that when we enter into sleep, as we're falling asleep, so that's one time you want to make sure that you are creating a vision of something that, of you having it already, not finding ways to get it, and, right, not the hows, but the the outcome already there, already with you. Assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
And I'm really good at trying to go for the house. I can tell you that it doesn't work. So
I have a timer on my phone. I have a timer on my phone for 3 times. It happens about 10 in the morning and maybe 2 in the afternoon and then 1 in the evening, maybe 7 o'clock. I don't even know the times, but it just pops up on my phone. It's in my calendar. It says, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Yeah. It's good.
So if I actually was paying attention every single time, it would be 4 times a day because those 3 times and then when I'm falling off to sleep. I'm not going to pretend like I always take the time every time I see that reminder, but pretty often I do. Because I've honed my vignettes down to where they don't take but 60 seconds. So when I see the reminder, I can usually find a minute to close my eyes to imagine, what I'm creating. Imagine it as it's already done. And I really like to bring the feelings into it. I had one vignette where I could feel a wedding ring on my finger and I could feel the stem of a glass and we were toasting. And that was the whole vignette. I just kept imagining that. I could smell the wine. I could feel the glass. I could hear people chattering because in my vignette we were in a restaurant. I could feel a wedding ring on my finger. I could feel my feet flat on the floor. I could, so I was bringing in all of my senses. And I got married. Today's my 1-week anniversary.
Yay!
I woke up the other morning and I could feel the ring on my finger and I was like, oh my goodness, that's it. That's just like this vignette. It felt the same. So it's not just seeing, but it's bringing all of those things in.
Nasha's very thankful for our messages. Plus, Jeffrey's been sending her some texts as well. She has one more thing. She says, one more thing, is it possible that we lack belief in certain things, and that's why they don't manifest? We see it as a dream and not as reality?
Ooh, yes. Neville had something to say about that. And this is where Neville gets a little twisty, like, ooh, this is, it's a short book of his called Out of This World. But he talks about the greater dimensional space. And using our imagination, he calls it the 4th dimension. He talks about a larger dimensional space. And the way I kind of made that make sense to me is that I'm a small person, so I take up a certain amount of space, not much. And then I'm in my office. My office is a certain amount of space. It's a small room. But when I'm in my imagination, I'm not limited to this small body. I'm not limited to this small room. I can be anywhere in my imagination. In my imagination, think about our dreams. We can fly. We can say, I had a dream last night and I was in Europe. I was somewhere else.
Right.
I was outside of we are bigger than just this body, than just this room. So he says in the greater dimensional space that's where you are creating. That's where your imagination resides. So when you're imagining this thing, that you mentioned that you call a fantasy, is it just a fantasy? This is another reason why it's very important that you feel with your body in your imagination. Like Neville uses this example. Imagine watching yourself climb a ladder. But then he says, now imagine the ladder's right in front of you and imagine yourself climbing it. You can feel your feet on the rungs. You can feel your hands on the sides. Mm-hmm. And so the reason he says it's so important is to sort of like in our imagination, to be in our body, and to do it for the enjoyment of it now is because Neville says time is not linear. And in that greater dimensional space, that larger dimensional space where your imagination is doing this work, mm-hmm. It is happening now. It is happening now.
That's right.
So I always remind myself of this a lot. Time is not linear. Time is not linear. I'm doing this work. It's like, and that usually gets me really excited. I'm like, it's happening right now. So yeah, I think the answer to your question is yes, we can get into place. If we're in the place where we're going, this is just a fantasy, well then it's just a fantasy. We want to recognize that everything that's happening is not limited to what we can see with our physical eyes.
Yeah, another way to put it is if we're deciding that it's just a dream, then we've basically put a limit on it. We've said, okay, it can never be more than a dream. But if we're going to say, oh, this is a dream, which has a completely different feel to it, and this is a dream, like, I really want this to come true, now we've taken the limits off. Now it's like, ooh, yeah, let's live it right now. This is good.
And this is true.
Mm-hmm.
How do I know? Because I just experienced it.
Yes.
I closed my eyes, and I experienced it. And time isn't linear, so it is. It's not that it will be. It's not that I hope it will be. It's that I know it is.
By the way, Jeffrey says congratulations on your wedding. And
thank you.
And Nasha says, sorry for my endless questions, but what if you visualize something at night, and as soon as you visualize, you go to sleep? There is this secure,
That's okay.
There is this secure feeling. I'm hoping I'm putting this across correctly. She doesn't really ask the question, but she raises the point.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know sometimes I will lay my head on the pillow with the intention that I'm going to run through this little vignette that's all of, 60 seconds, and I don't remember another thing. It's like, okay, I don't know if I did it or not. I was out. I fall asleep so fast sometimes. That's okay. And this is what Neville says is so important. It's important that when we are, since he says sleep is the gateway into the subconscious, when we enter that door, we want to be the person that has that thing already.
Mm-hmm.
We want the person who's done that thing already. We want to be the best-selling author or the married person or whatever it is that we're imagining. We want to enter through that doorway as that person because every single thing you experience in your life is directly connected to your sense of identity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about your identity, our I am stories. And so we want to be that. We want to be that person that's experiencing that already as we're falling asleep. So yes, it's okay to fall asleep. We want to fall asleep. Perfect.
Nasha had a great follow comment. She says, yes, a perfect example is Prince Harry and Meghan. I thought that was an interesting choice. And Jeffrey has been sharing a number of different thoughts. He says, fantasies are so much fun, seeing all that is possible. Dreams do come true. Can it happen for you too? He was replying that to Nash, actually, to Nasha. But yeah, I mean, that really nails it. And I got to send a hello to Janina Roman, who has joined the group. She's one of the authors of our book. And so, hello, Janina. Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. So I don't see any other questions coming up here. So, but we have a lot of people paying attention to it. So we're getting the attention. We're getting some involvement, and that's a good thing. That's part of the experiment for today.
No, I love it. I love the questions and the comments, and knowing that we're having this conversation together. And those are the two pieces that I think are the most important. The one is revision. Now, I'll tell you, one of the things I learned from Neville, and I cannot say that I can do this really well. For a year or so, I practiced it, and I still do. I just haven't been doing it like I did for that year. But he talks somewhere about as you're falling asleep at night, well, not as you're falling asleep, but as you go to bed, to remember your day in reverse. So every part of it, moving backwards. So in other words, I'm in bed, and the last thing I did before I got into bed was I turned the lights off in the other room, and before that I had, put on my pajamas, and right before that I had gotten a drink of water, and he's like going detail by detail all the way through the entire day. Now, first of all, I don't know if I've ever made it to the beginning of that day in my mind without just falling asleep. But the reason why this is important is because it's another exercise to help us train our mind and get control of our mental direction so that we can laser focus on something. And so
it's a good one too. I mean, it's a good order. I like doing it in reverse order. I think we talked about that one time on one of our podcasts, but I kind of forgot about it. But it is a good way to do it because if you do it in reverse order, the stuff that's most recent is the one that you remember easiest. And so you're basically walking it backward. And that's good. That way you're not going to skip anything. You're going to do the whole day that way.
And then he has you revise anything that wasn't how you wanted it to go.
Right. Going back to what we talked about before.
In the process of remembering the day, you are, doing that, the pruning shears of revision is what he says. He says an interesting thing later in his life when he's lecturing. He says, we always think of, now here's where he gets a little, starts using Christian scripture. He says, we always think of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve as being a long time ago, but it's not. It's right now. You're in the garden right now. You're in the Garden of Eden right now, and you've got your pruning shears, and you have to work this every day if you want the garden to be what you want it to be. So he's talking about the importance of using these pruning shears of revision, that he calls them, going back through your day, revising the memories of the things that weren't to your liking. He says to do it every day. He says you can't do it once in a while. Just like if you have a garden, you can't just decide you're going to work in there just one day a year and it's going to look great. No, it's going to get overgrown with all kinds of weeds and things that you don't want. So he is explicitly saying this is an everyday thing. That's the revision. Then there are the ideas of falling asleep, imagining yourself with the outcome that you want. That's been the one that for the last 6 months I've probably done the most. Mm-hmm. I've done this Neville stuff for 15 years, but more recently it's been these small vignettes and making them small. One of the ones I love that he suggests is if you want you could really do this for anything. He says a promotion at your job, but think about how many things I just got. Jeffrey just congratulated me right now. So
right.
So it's like, cause he says, imagine yourself reaching out, shaking the hand of your friend, and your friend is saying, congratulations, congratulations on your new promotion. We've had lots of people congratulate us over the past week. And so really, there's lots of things that you want. If you do win the Powerball, someone's going to congratulate you, right? If you tell anyone.
There are some people I think would tell everybody, but your point is well taken.
But look at people that say, I've been trying to heal myself of something, and I just came from the doctor and I had a good report. What do we say? Congratulations. So it's not just a promotion at your job. There's lots of things that people may congratulate you for. And what he says is that that's it. It doesn't have to be any longer than that. Imagine your friend congratulating you and imagine you saying thank you. Mm-hmm. And he says you may want to take that word that you said, thank you, and use that as your mantra as you're falling asleep and just imagining shaking that hand. So see, he's not devising you to write some 10-paragraph long, screenplay. Just something short. And that, I think, has been super effective for me in the past 6 months. Because I think I used to do it a little differently. And the more I was reading and the more we were dissecting everything, tearing it up, the more I started realizing, it needs to be short. Mm-hmm. To where we really, and I think I told you this, I don't know if we were podcasting or if it was off air, but I was imagining the vignette I told you about. I was sitting in a restaurant and I kept imagining my feet on the floor. Right. And feeling myself in the chair and my hands on the table. And one day when I was imagining it, I noticed the specific pair of shoes I have on. And I didn't say, I need to figure out what I'm wearing or anything. I just have to, in my imagination, I glanced down and I had a certain pair of shoes on. I went, oh, that's funny. My imagination started adding little details.
Which is nice. Yeah.
But it was still just that same short little vignette. So keep it short and do it over and over.
Nasha has another follow-up. She says, and is there a time limit for your wish to manifest? And how can one be happy when things are going the total opposite way that makes one depressed, down, and angry? And she also had a second one. At times it's so difficult when you have to make some toxic people reverse their actions. Secondly, how do we reverse something which has hurt us during the day? You touched on that earlier, but here's another chance to talk about that.
Right. So there's a bunch of things in there. We can't do anything about other people's actions or behaviors. And yet they often change when we start revising our memories of things that have happened. And then the other thing is just a really basic relationship thing. It has nothing to do with Neville or with magic or with any kind of mental work, but it's just creating strong boundaries. And, the simplest boundary is letting someone know what's okay and what's not okay. And
Absolutely right.
We often don't do that because it feels like a difficult conversation. And, my husband says he always jokes about the words, we need to talk, because me being a relationship coach, we talk about communication a lot. And he always jokes, those are the scariest words anyone's ever heard, right? When someone comes up to you and says, we need to talk.
Right.
But just creating a boundary, just being willing to say that it's not okay, whatever it is, whatever that toxic behavior you're talking about is. Because here's the thing, when we tolerate things in our life, whether it's behavior from someone else or whether it's, we all tolerate things sometimes, right? We tolerate that the light bulb in the porch has been burned out for 3 months and we don't want to change it, so we just tolerate that there's no light out there.
Right.
As long as we tolerate things, you will not manifest like you want to.
I got a few more questions and comments here. One, I'm going to take them out of order because Janina, our friend who helped write our book, wrote, let's see, where is it? Visualizing, hearing thank you works even better if accompanied by the feeling of appreciation or the feeling you're after.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We want the feelings in there. Yeah, feelings are the secret, right?
Absolutely.
That's the title of the Neville book. Yeah,
That's
feeling
right.
is the secret.
Feeling is the secret. That's right. Nasha also offers her congratulations to you and prayers and best wishes
Thank you, Nasha.
for your future with your husband. And Dacia, who's just recently joined us, says, how can I manifest the perfect guy in my life? In fact, any guy, really. And I understand that feeling, too.
Well, I'm going to say something funny right now. We have this idea with coaches. I mean, a lot of different professions, but we call it the doorknob question because people will go to the doctor and they don't ask the doctor that question that they really want to know.
Right.
And then right as the doctor's going out the door, they go, oh, by the way, I wanted to know about this. And I'm laughing, so I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, we got 4 minutes, and the questions started pouring in.
Well, that's right. We can go over. We're not limited to an hour, so we're okay.
Well, I am, though.
But you are. Oh, well, then we do have a limit. Okay.
But here's what I would say. Whether you want to manifest a great guy, and don't say just any guy. Like, no, let's go for the great guy. Let's go for the perfect match for you. Let's go for, and there are lots of them, by the way. I believe that I just married my soulmate, and I also believe that there's not just one person out there for you. There's a lot of people on the planet, and there are probably a lot of wonderful people who will be a great match for you. So what I would say is to imagine what it would be like to already have that. I mean, that sounds like, but that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about figure out what it is that you would like to feel, how you would like to feel if you already were in that great relationship, and imagine that. Create a short vignette. It doesn't have to be hugely detailed, and just imagine it. Imagine it over and over. And then let yourself enjoy what it feels like while you're imagining it.
Exactly right. Yeah, no, that's
and
good.
Don't give up. Keep going. And then the other thing, let everybody know that you're looking for a great guy.
Now, Basia did post one other thing. She says they're all taken. All the good ones are taken, she says.
Well, I've only taken one good one.
You're not greedy, huh?
Here's the thing, is that sounds like a limiting belief, and that's one I hear a lot. All the good ones are taken.
Yeah.
And so when you catch yourself having that thought, recognize that it's really not true. Do you think that there's any other woman on the planet who in the next 30 days is going to find a really great guy and fall in love? Right? I mean, it would be ridiculous to say no. To say no, there's not one woman on the entire planet who is going to find a great guy in the next 30 days.
Actually,
why is it ridiculous? Saying,
that's
do
the
you
opposite
think
of what
there's
my
a person?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of what my wife said.
Do you think there's a person that won't get a job in the next 30 days? Of course people will get jobs.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife had just the opposite reaction. We were in our 40s when we met. And before we met, she put out the idea that not only were all the good ones not taken, but she was going to ask everyone she knew, do you know of any healthy single guys, mentally healthy single guys?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's how she found me.
Yeah.
She could have fallen into it because when you're in your 40s, that's the time to start saying all the good ones are taken. Well, she didn't say that.
Well, that's the thing that always surprises me. It's how many times I ask a client coming to me because they want to create a relationship, and I say, who knows? Does your family know, your neighbors, people you work with, your circle of friends? Do they know that you're looking for a husband? Mm-hmm. Do they know that you want a partner? And they say, well, I don't know. Or they say, no, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, it's time to get busy, because that's how we manifest things. We're all connected. And we manifest the things we want in our life often by connection. Either someone gives us information, someone presents us with an opportunity. I mean, that's how we find out about things. So don't just let the universe know. Let the people that are part of the universe know.
Right. Which is part of it, by the way.
Best wishes to you. If that's your intention, it will happen.
It will. It will.
Yeah.
Well, we've used up our hour, and I know you have other things you have to go do next. I want to let people know, though, even though we don't have enough time to take more questions today, you and I do podcasts on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, particularly the Wednesday afternoon podcast, which is the same time slot as this one. If we couldn't get to your question today, by all means, join us on the Tuesday and Wednesday podcast. I'm posting in the group, in the events calendar, when the various shows are happening, and the ones with Cindy are Tuesday, Wednesday morning, East Coast time in the U.S., and Wednesday afternoon around the same time that we're doing here on Sunday. We'll also consider perhaps doing another weekend one sometimes to answer some more questions, but we certainly would love to have you join us for our regular podcast, or even send in questions. You can send questions to us by email, or send us messages by messenger or text message or whatever, and we would love to not only take your messages, but we've talked about stuff on the air. I mean, Joel and I in particular have talked about somebody sends in a message via the website or whatever. We spend the entire show talking about it, so and we love it.
Absolutely. We love it. We love it.
Yeah. A lot of fun.
Keep those cards and letters coming. That's
right. Boy, you haven't heard that phrase in a long time, have you? Especially with the internet these days. But no, this is good. So thank you to everybody who came to visit us during our podcast, during our live stream here in the Law of Attraction Change My Life group. And Cindy, thank you for taking the time out of your weekend to share your insight and your wisdom and the wonderful insights of the Neville Decoder ring.
Thank you. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. And we hope that you'll all join us next time we do all of our podcasts, too. You can find the schedule on the homepage of our website, loatoday.net. We also invite you to be a subscriber. It's easy to subscribe. The instructions are also there on the homepage. And when you're a subscriber, you get all the podcasts coming directly to your smart device. And meantime, we're going to say best wishes, and we'll see you next time on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.